Hello and welcome to my therapy session. I know some rappers are already in the booth about to drop a diss track called A Culture Vulture featuring Benzino against me because their wires told them I'm making this video. So let me just clarify, I'm leaving my opinions on who has won, who lost, and who got bodied out of this. We're in our element even if you're not a hip-hop fan, so don't worry humanoid creatures, because we're talking allegations, which is the key word of today's video, as there's not much proof, just some evidence supporting the case. With that being said, you're going to find out how firm some of these bars are from a realistic standpoint for us, people that are not directly involved. Got it? Cool. Spin this shit. We're gonna go in order of the accusations being thrown, and we'll be focusing on the heavy hitters. So don't be surprised that I skipped the allegation against Kendrick of him being short or Drake being unlikable. But since this particular series of diss tracks were officially kickstarted by Drake's push-ups, let's quickly push up the dirt that's been thrown there. The first allegation comes from within the title itself, partially at least. Of course, I'm referring to this part.
To stop told you drop and give me 50 likes on push-ups.
And while Kendrick having a video of him doing push-ups on YouTube isn't exactly exhilarating, breathtaking, or anything anyone other than superfans would give any amount of fucks ever, the second meaning is much more interesting, as it alludes to previous K-Dot's labels using him ever since he was 16, by contractual obligation that's, let's just say, less than favorable for the artist himself. As according to Drake, 50% of all profits would go to them. Kendrick's father was good friends with the CEO of Top Dog Entertainment, and Kendrick even said that without him, he wouldn't live to tell the tale, as he saved his father from a shootout. A story which Kendrick told in 2017 through a record called Duckworth. And yet, in 2022, Kendrick did leave them to do his own thing, which doesn't mean much by itself, and overall I didn't find anything to think that Kendrick doesn't stand his ground on this matter, and he most probably still holds the same amount of respect towards Anthony Tiffith as he did when he recorded Duckworth. But everything else is just rumors. Nobody that worked with Top Dog Entertainment has come out saying that they were used by them, so we have no proof. Just as we don't have any photos of the contracts themselves though, like Drake wanted to see. So it can go either way really. It's also worth noting that just because Kendrick isn't signed there anymore, it doesn't mean they don't still own rights to all his previous albums. So if the contract really was as crazy as said in this record, then K-Dot could still be making them a real bang. Other than that though, Kai Cenat makes a cameo, so YouTube represent, I guess. Oh, and Drake saying the beef didn't start with the song Like That is absolutely true. The beef can be publicly traced back all the way to 2010 even, if you stretch it a little. And I got receipts through K-Dot's lyrics you can now see on the screen. But yeah, Drake says he will release much worse info if Kendrick responds. And that wraps up the push-up session. Hope you had a good workout. Yo, I just wanted to take a moment to say that I know everything. Okay? If you don't want me to drop this nuclear bomb of character assassination on your face, you better subscribe. Got it? Good. Now you're officially one of my ghostwriters. Whoa, what was that? I don't remember writing that one in. It must have been somebody else. Speaking of things I've never experienced and reading something for the first time, next on the line we got Euphoria. Now, the title is crazy, but just remember this is not a lyrical breakdown kind of video, even though as a writer I must admit I'm a little bit tempted to do that. But I know we're here to be the internet council of judges, like we're marching towards an uphill battle through rumors and deceits, so I'm not going to talk about it. Wait, what? You're saying I missed a song? Listen, I just don't want to be sued by Tupac's group, okay? Let your boy get to live another day, will you? No, but jokes aside, there is only one, probably the biggest accusation in this entire beef being mentioned here, which we'll talk about very soon. But other than that, it's a challenge type of song, pressuring Kendrick to drop and painting him in a bad way. Not to mention, I personally really don't like the use of AI there, and I know I said I won't bring my personal thoughts into it, but I'm talking from a simple morality standpoint. I get what Drake was going for there. It could honestly be a really clever and hurtful angle if done right, but AI voices just ain't it. So now we will go to aforementioned Euphoria.
Let's speak on percentage. Show me your splits. I'll make sure I double back with you. media.
This is Kendrick's response to what we just talked about, and while he doesn't disprove anything that Drake said, he's proclaiming Drake has got even worse contracts throughout his career. An accusation that was already thrown at Drake before, back in 2018 by Pusha T, specifically with the Young Money label, which he signed with back in 2009, which was quite famously known as basically like a fucking Ponzi scheme of the music industry, as they themselves were also signed by multiple other companies. So the money they and their contractors made was being shared through many pockets, let's just say. So yeah, the fact that Drake had terrible contracts in his past as well is basically proven. We don't know of the exact details though.
Try cease and desist on the Like That record.
Here K-Dot accuses Drake of trying to take down the Like That song, in which Kendrick and Future threw jabs at Drake and J. Cole, with Metro Boomin, the producer of the beat you can hear on that record, later showing proof of that claim by tweeting a screenshot of Drake's label trying to revoke the rights of Like That being played in radio, as we know, unsuccessfully. Whether this was Drake or just his label acting on their own is unknown, but this allegation has been practically confirmed to be true.
I got a son to raise, but I can see you know nothing about that.
Is a direct response to Drake's second diss, in which he rushed Kendrick to respond as quickly as possible, and it, once again, alludes to the Pusha T diss against Drake, during which it was exposed that he had a secret child, a son. According to the mother of this child, Drake apparently sent text egging her to proceed with an abortion, to which she didn't comply. And back in 2017, she faced a lot of hate because Drake would not admit it to be his kid before, up until a DNA test has officially confirmed it to be true. Ever since then, even though they weren't together, they seem to share both mutual respect towards one another and custody of their son. But it's also undeniable that he's not living with his kid and doesn't see him every day. Many were also saying that the only reason Drake started parenting is because of the public pushback against him. So that's a common narrative against Drake of him being a pretender, even when it comes to parenting.
Am I batting Ghost or AI?
You know the deal with AI already, while Ghost is referring to ghostwriters. This critique has also been very popular for years now, saying that Drake lacks authenticity and talent with the pen and just reads off somebody else's work. Is there proven validity to these claims? Well, yes, but there's also a very common misconception regarding this thing. Ghostwriting isn't about just anyone who helps with writing on a project. It's about artists' work being anonymously bought out by somebody else so that it can seem like they were the ones who made it. So pointing towards Drake crediting other people for writing wouldn't mean he had ghostwriters. A misconception which many people fell for even regarding this very beef, as Push-Ups technically has 9 other people listed in the credits, but it's normal to have writers on a project with you. Where it would get shaky is dependable on the amount of contribution those writers have on a song. With that being said though, Drake has 99% crossed that line before, and it's very apparent from both what some of his co-workers said about him and from just listening to how different of a story some of his lyrics began to tell over time. Drake himself admitted to having collaborators, but there was nothing to admit to since that part was literally publicly credited, unless he's saying he didn't credit them, but that would mean he did have ghostwriters even though he explicitly shut that down. There's one more big allegation that we'll dive into later that's on here, so this concludes our euphoric state. Back to my usual indifference, I guess. Fuck! Next on the line is 616 in LA. So we're already in California like we made it, and I'm about to switch up on all of you. A fun fact I just have to mention is that the entire concept of both title and the way it was released was taken straight from Drake's book, as Kendrick actually praised Drake's double diss track release he had against Meek Mill back in 2015 in Euphoria, while also giving his own back-to-back song a title resembling the way some of Drake's records look like structurally, which is just really fun. I'm a sucker for these kinds of references, if you couldn't tell by watching like every other video on my channel.
Have you ever thought that OVO is working for me? Fake bully, I hate bullies, you must be a terrible person. Everyone inside your team is whispering thinking that you deserve it.
OVO, full name OVO Sound, is a Canadian music label co-founded by Drake. And a lot of people that have problem with Drake were once working with him directly. There's a bunch of lines about Drake having Kendrick's wire right alongside him. So basically Kendrick says most of Drake's employees are secretly against him. Is it the truth? That part was never proven. And looking at it rationally, I don't think many employees give a fuck really. They just collect paychecks, so they probably wouldn't jeopardize their job for somebody else's beef. But some people there are deeply involved within the culture and have connections with others already. And we know that a lot of mainstream rap game don't fuck with Drake, so while it's absolutely not impossible, I highly doubt it's serious enough to be a huge chunk of his group. At worst, Drake is just a very unlikable, morally dubious boss. So don't take it at face value and just think of there being a possibility of a wire, with taking into consideration that a lot of people who once worked with him publicly dislike him now. Other than this, there were no big time allegations thrown here. And while Kendrick did say Drake has lied about him, he didn't provide any receipts, nor could I find anything from this timeline that would really dispute Drake's allegations against him. So that's about it. Damn, even after that trip to LA I'm still pale. That sucks. Alright, thus far it was mostly talk about respect and money. And if you got to this part of the vid, then congratulations! As this is where it gets genuinely very heavy. No matter if it's just music and entertainment or not. We're talking horrible people behavior, if any of that is true. And we begin with Drake's track Family Matters, which just by the name you can say it got out of pocket and the beef's being driven in a crazy direction. One direction, somebody could say. This entire part that I'm showing on screen right now says a lot. So instead of reading it all and explaining it all one by one, we're just gonna get straight into all the context at once. Bringing in Kendrick's fiancée's race is due to K-Dot's angle against Drake, saying that he's mixed race himself and doesn't belong to the culture. So Drake calls it hypocritical. Kid Vanilla Cream is a euphemism to having intercourse with a white woman. And since Kendrick and his fiancée were high school sweethearts, that would mean infidelity, which, by the way, is confirmed by K-Dot himself through his own artistry. He admitted to having these problems, which, hey, hot take, that's absolute garbage behavior. But yeah, K-Dot didn't keep that one a secret. They were also on and off throughout the relationship, but Kendrick did specify cheating, meaning while they were in a relationship. Drake also alludes to Whitney, that being Kendrick's fiancée, cheating back on him with Dave Free, Kendrick's childhood friend who obviously also known Whitney throughout all this time since, you know, they lived in the same environment and had a mutual friend. Whitney also follows Dave Free on socials while she doesn't follow K-Dot, which is a thing people care about apparently, even though Whitney never followed K-Dot on any social medias, even when they were together officially. Ever since then, Whitney posted on Instagram once, but she didn't acknowledge the beef, just sent a message saying Happy Mother's Day to herself, and with Kendrick alluding to the possibility of them not being together in one of his tracks back in 2022, it's very possible they are just not together anymore. Who knows, I'm not gonna snoop more, they clearly want to keep that private and it's their choice. With that being said, DJ Academics disproved this allegation during one of his live streams, saying Whitney definitely did not have a kid with Dave Free, which strongly discredited Drake. One thing I will say though is that it would mean that K-Dot doesn't really see his kids every day either. So when he said before that Drake is a bad father while he has to take care of his children, it kinda went against his previous record in which he alluded to the fact he doesn't have time for family because of his career. But that was 2022 and he didn't really release much after that, so maybe he realized his mistake and sees Drake as someone who never learned that lesson and is stuck in that loop that he was once in, which would make sense.
When you put your hands on your girl, is it self-defense cause she bigger than you?
Now this is just grim, as Drake obviously suggests that other than emotional abuse dealt through infidelity, Kendrick was also physically abusive towards his fiancée. Drake probably got that idea from the fact their relationship seemed to be really bad and toxic a lot of times. Which, as I said before, he definitely never said anything about raising a hand against her, nor did Whitney confirm anything of this sorts publicly. That being said, does her past raise these kinds of worries? Absolutely, and this is one of the things K. didn't respond to, which is suspicious, but at the same time there's also no definite proof for this claim being true, so it is concerning and something to keep in mind, but overall it is innocent until proven guilty, and there's just not enough evidence to say this is true, so I'll leave it at that. All I'll say is that this is definitely the worst allegation of them all, and the fact that it wasn't denied is crazy. Back from this darkest topic into something mild, Drake bounces the allegations of ghostwriters by saying Kendrick's cousin ghostwrites for him, even though, as I just said, there is a difference between a ghostwriter and a credited writer, and K.'s cousin is the second case. But I get it, he says he writes for him even when he isn't credited, which, very surprisingly, there's no proof for it, hence the ghost in the name. He does the same trick with bouncing back the allegation with the cease and desist thing by saying it was K. and his label that contacted Tupac estate and begged them to sue Drake for using Tupac's AI voice on his diss. No proof could be found of this allegation, so it's seemingly just him flipping the script there. So other than this and that one line about Kendrick not wanting their kids to play together because he doesn't want to be in company of racially mixed people, which is admittedly hilarious considering the culture angle he took, that's all for Family Matters, where we learned that family truly matters when it comes to lyrical beefs, which is crazy, but hey, not the first time something like this happened. We met one dysfunctional family already, and the thing about Shining Stars is that toxicity is a very common trait amongst them. So let's now meet the Grams for an absolutely wild ride of shit talking. This track was famously released basically right after Drake uploaded Family Matters, a move which already is becoming a new strategy or even a trend in rap beefs, which just shows how effective it was here. Not to mention he was also pretty much directly answering to that diss too, showcasing he really did have info on what Drake's about to drop and just straight up confirmed this allegation. But let's stop babbling and let's get our hands dirty with this one. Entire diss takes a wild ass angle because it doesn't address Drake directly, it talks to his different family members individually. Just by hearing that you could probably guess this would be hella hurtful and offensive if that were you, and that's exactly the point. The morality and any resemblance of sportsmanship was already thrown aside a long time ago in this fight by both participants, so at this point just go with what hurts the most. That's a very smart and original storytelling play on K.'s part too. But the craziest thing we'll talk about from all of this is the third shocking verse this narration enabled Kendrick to conjure, because after speaking to Drake's son and parents in the first two verses, he now revealed the existence of the alleged second child that Drake apparently kept hidden from the world all this time. Her name wasn't stated, and according to K. she's 11 years old and possibly doesn't even know who her real father even is. He calls Drake a deadbeat narcissist, which, you know, we're not gonna talk about the allegations of psychological illnesses and disorders, because we'd literally need Drake's psychiatrist for that, or at least his therapist that he admitted to having, which honestly good for him. I genuinely believe every single famous person should book themselves a therapist as soon as possible. It's obviously better late than never, but it can't be argued that he did showcase behavior that would at least slightly allude to the traits that people suffering from narcissism possess, and he definitely has been straight up misogynistic in many cases. But then again, that's that's the truth for like at least 80% of all mainstream rappers, and I'm being very generous with the percentage here. Is the rumor about a daughter true? Is it not? See, credit to people for finding out exactly what most probably kickstarted that train of thought inside Kendrick Lamar's head, because back in 2012, Drake posted a cryptic message simply saying "baby girl" on Twitter, seemingly never explaining what it meant, which is as suspicious as it gets with allegations like this. There are even some theories that the child was the kickstarter of this beef, because their last collab was recorded back in 2012, and Kendrick, being definitely more known as a family person compared to Drake, would, in this scenario, keep pestering him to take care of the girl, which Drake would dismiss. Is there any proof to any of that? Fuck no! Not even close. But let's not act like it's a stretch to say Drake doesn't have multiple children around the world. Come on, the guy lived a bachelor life basically his entire career. He's a music star, and that culture is fucking degenerative in general, so it wouldn't exactly be a surprise. With that being said, that story I just mentioned is most probably a huge ass reaching foul. Drake denied these specific allegations almost immediately, which he didn't do with anything else, mocking the topic by asking people to find his hidden daughter. So we're keeping the same energy and saying it's innocent until proven guilty. And Drake even denied these allegations personally, which I believe gives it a bit more of closure and certainty rather than not saying anything at all. There's no receipts to be found anywhere, there's just theories. So until any single mother previously associated with Drake doesn't get him to do a parental test that gives a positive result, it remains just an artistic job with no validity in real world. And even if that allegation were to be true, I have a slight suspicion these women would probably be under some kind of a fat contract or agreement to not speak of it publicly either way, and they probably wouldn't want to take their biggest passive income away from themselves, so I wouldn't count your horses personally, even if you believe it, but that's just me. So these are some strong lines, but I think we finally reached the time where the elephant in the room cannot be avoided anymore. The room's getting too small for that, so let's talk about the most heinous accusation of this entire beef. An accusation which, if true, would expose an entire ring of completely sick, gone fucks that should be thrown to jail indubitably. And that's the numerous alleged stories of Drake being a sex offender, a predator, and not only a normal predator, but according to K.Dot's story, basically a leader of entire human trafficking group hidden under Drake's music label. So yes, K.Dot also called musicians signed their that. Now, I don't think I have to explain how serious something like this is. This shit would basically be Epstein Island level of evilness and should be raided like Diddy immediately. And I know it's hard to keep it level-headed in the face of such allegations, but remember that this is a rap beef and we can't take stuff at face value. So let's browse through some proof or clues on either side regarding this. First off, one of the artists signed into OVO label was arrested for human trafficking about a decade ago, before joining their squad. Or was he? Yeah, this information was huge, but to be fair to everybody involved, that's not exactly true. The artist being in our scope right now is Paka Not Nice, and the actual reason he went to jail was for assault and being a pimp of a single woman. Notice how I said jail? His charges were also dropped, which, you know, with rich artists it doesn't really mean much, but it gives them at least a bit more credibility. A horrible person? Probably. A human trafficker? Nope, not according to any official records at least. And that was the main connection to Drake being deep into this shit. And while it is hella dubious that he signed a person like that into his label, even after he seemingly was such a piece of shit and a criminal, it doesn't prove any ties towards these kinds of rings whatsoever. So while that particular thing kinda took the fire out of K.Dot's allegation a little bit, it also further exposed that Drake doesn't really give a fuck about morality whatsoever.
It's all about career.
At least you can definitely take that angle. Although it's also worth noting that every other rapper talks about pimping and crime. Look, the culture just kinda went to shit, I'm not gonna lie. But putting that aside, as we just said, there's not any real proof to Drake having ties with these kinds of circles. But just because that's the case doesn't mean there won't be anything about the Predator allegations. And let me just say there is a lot of weird shit on record when it comes to Drake interacting with minors. Like some genuinely concerning stuff. There are also some normal instances you can spot, like how Eminem said Drake helped his daughter, so he's clearly not always a creep. But just because someone isn't always a demon doesn't mean he can't be one in another time, and there's just a lot of odd shit. Like that clip that was quite famous once with Millie Bobby Brown in an interview during which Millie was just 14, where she talked about them texting back and forth and Drake giving her advice on boys. Sorry, it's tough to stomach saying this shit. It's very weird and gross and just shouldn't be happening. And there's more of this kind of stuff. Like with Kylie Jenner, whom he known when she was a minor and they later on dated for a while. Which isn't pedophilia, but there's some very real indication of grooming that I just can't look past. He was also confirmed to be a fan of girls' basketball team, following the players on IG, etc. Which again is not a clear indication of anything. There was never any type of scandal leaked with these girls, not when they were underage at least. But it's so fucking shady when we look at it from a wider perspective. These incidents just seem to repeat themselves. Now, calling someone a predator is basically one of the worst things you can say about somebody publicly, and you know I'm not going to do that if there's no concrete proof, which, spoiler alert, as of me making this video there isn't anything. So while I can't say Kendrick's allegation here is confirmed, I do want to point out that from public eye's perspective it does look like there's at least some long game grooming involved, which is obviously absolutely sickening, and it makes listening to this part of song leave a really bad taste in one's mouth. Like, this is something that makes some people straight up hate Aubrey Graham as a person, not an artist like beefs usually do. And looking at all the real life documented proof, it definitely doesn't come out of thin air. Alright, let's wrap this one up. So K-Dot also accuses Drake of disrespecting his own mother, which he did in his own artistry on a song called Look What You've Done. Also further playing into portraying Drake as a misogynist, which we already mentioned. He also alleges Drake of switching up on his religion, because he doesn't promote any Jewish beliefs anymore, even to the point of allegedly not spending time with a Judaistic spiritual leader on prayers during breaks on set. Also going from
God's Plan,
which was a very famous record of his, to stating in one of his more recent songs that he thinks
Heaven is a front.
or saying,
So pardon me questioning God and not believing in much.
so yeah, this allegation was also proven by Drake himself pretty much. Kendrick also calls out Drake for being a gambler and having problems with substances, which there are records of both. Not to mention Drake is a partner of things like stake.com, which is an online gambling site. But to be honest, that's once again like 80% of mainstream artists. And that's it. God damn it, I need some holy water after all this. Kendrick really said we're going back to back and then back to back, because he released Not Like Us consecutively, less than 24 hours after releasing Meet the Grams. And this one is centered around exposing Drake for not really being a part of the culture. There's really not much to talk about allegations wise, as other than going after Drake's street cred very detailed manner, he also doubles down on previous allegations, like calling Drake and some of his close surroundings predators, which we already talked about extensively. So since this track is very direct and talks about Drake's history, all the different rappers like 21 Savage being Drake's link to a gangster life, etc. Just really good storytelling and painting a picture of Drake being a poser who stole everything from the culture. It's an interpretation of history that very cleverly puts put facts about Drake's artistic life in order. So not much to talk about other than just enjoying it either way. As a fun fact, I will have to mention that this is a record-breaking record, with it skyrocketing to becoming Billboard #1 and being the most streamed in a day song on Spotify of all time. No matter which side you're on, you gotta give huge props for that. Kendrick cooked with this one. From quality of the diss to strategy of its marketing. This is it. We're at the finish line with the last song being The Heart Part 6, done and released by Drake. And funnily enough, there's a lot to talk about here. Why it's funny? Well, because this is considered by many to be the most obviously debunked one out of all of them, which is interesting considering it's the last one. Is there any truth to those claims? Let's find out. First allegation is a spin on Kendrick's Wire Talk, where Drake says they fed him fake information on purpose, like the thing with that apparently missing daughter, which would also give more context as to why Drake responded with that Instagram post denying these accusations almost immediately after Kendrick dropped, as he really was ready to type it out beforehand in this scenario. This way Drake wanted to take gas out of Kendrick's lyrics. But just as I said when talking about Kendrick mentioning double agents, I still think both of these things could be true at the same time. And this is just a game theory I'm throwing out there. To be clear, there's no proof either way. We just have strong clues that Kendrick knew some things and pretty good clues that Drake knew some things. I personally thought that while one person fed K. wrong information, another one from Drake's team really was two-faced. And that's how Kendrick knew about the general direction of Drake talking shit about his family, for example. But remember, all speculations here.
You haven't seen the kids in 6 months. The distance is wild.
Again, the deadbeat father allegation being flipped. And it's based on the fact that Kendrick has been living in New York, Brooklyn, seemingly away from his children for the last 6 months or so, since that's where he's working with his label. So there seemingly is some validity to that. As we said before, K. and Whitney's relationship was hinted at being romantically over by Kendrick's music itself. And as we stated before, we're not gonna try to breach their privacy, so we're gonna leave it at that. It's an interesting point that definitely wasn't proven neither right or wrong. A lot of this song is denying allegations, which is just word against word, so I'm not going to mention these lines. Okay, this is the controversial shit I've been talking about, and it's pretty bad. Basically, Drake had multiple lines about Kendrick Lamar's PTSD, suggesting that he got molested, and because of that he accused Drake of being a predator, which is just not fucking true. The information comes off of a misinterpretation of one of the Kendrick Lamar songs in which he talks about his PTSD and traumas. But he never stated anywhere that he was molested. And Drake trying to mock him for it just made him look like a douchebag and a wannabe bully to the masses. And some people think all is fair game in beef without any lines that can't be crossed. But by misinterpreting public information that everybody can go and verify for themselves, he made himself look like an idiot who doesn't understand Kendrick's music, which is just an ultimate self-roast in a rap battle. Using the fact that somebody was sexually abused as a child is very much weirdo behavior. But creating a scenario in which somebody was sexually abused as a child through interpreting the words of a victim wrong is just next level. Wow. It's worth noting that it's possible Drake does this deliberately. Maybe he wanted to prove some kind of a point. Maybe he wanted to say that K. was not being 100% truthful when talking about all the harm he's been exposed to. Or maybe he just said the song about his trauma is very forgettable for Drake and he doesn't care about him. But even in these cases, it doesn't really make it better. Definitely not for me, I guess. Using traumas and and psychological issues just ain't it. It will never make people look worse than you saying that shit. Just general words of advice.
Stop buying views and bot comments.
Pretty self-explanatory line here. There's no proof of this whatsoever, and both camps accused each other of this. So it's just word against word.
If you're still bumping R. Kelly, you could thank the savior.
Now, this one is an interesting rebuttal against Drake signing a shady felon before, as Drake is pointing out that Kendrick was against R. Kelly being taken away from streaming platforms like Spotify. With that being said, those were actually Top Dog's Entertainment CEO's words, not Kendrick's. But it is true that Kendrick actively promoted XXXTentacion's music, who was also a very troubling character, and even K. Dot himself, when talking about R. Kelly, mentioned how we need to separate art from the artist. So while I think most people agree with that sentiment, you have to admit it is accurately showing Kendrick's hypocrisy on this matter. Honestly, I think the bad reputation is because of that one egregious lie that took so much of this song's airtime too. But other than it, there's really not anything crazy. So would I still call it the worst one when it comes to authenticity? Yeah, I would. Only because it's so easy to disprove this horrible point he kept on making. Doubling and tripling down on something that's wrong. It's just simply not a good look, is all. But other than that distasteful moment, the information's not that bad. Nothing we haven't really seen before when it comes to heavy hitters that we're targeting. And that one rebuttal line was very solid and provable, which is nice. So, to summarize, let's answer the long-awaited question. Can any of their careers end because of this? And can they realistically go to jail over that beef? The only way Drake's career can take a huge nosedive through this beef is tied to a specific scenario in which he used to call kids on a cell phone late night when their parents slept. But other than that, history has shown that nobody cares, for better and the worse. You might think it's fucked up. I'd partially agree with you on that, but don't hate the messenger, I'm just stating facts here. And the truth is that even if what was said about Kendrick was true, it would not hurt his career whatsoever. Some people would look at him with disdain, for sure. Some would even stop listening to him altogether. But in the grand scheme of things, not a single thing would change. Especially since Kendrick got everybody used to dropping something new every 4 years. So even the prison sentence wouldn't matter. Label would just drop his unreleased records. But I'm just messing at this point. Neither of them are going to prison over a rap beef. Drake is quite literally a billionaire, so if push came to shove, he'd just run away from here. Which, hey, shout out to capitalism! But remember, these are all just potential scenarios. They are not proven, not to us at least. There are people who know the truth, and it certainly ain't us. But now you get all the context and have good enough basis to draw your own conclusions, I believe. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next session.
This is my brother ASAP Rocky. This is my brother Kendrick Lamar.